Hey guys, and welcome back. It is another beautiful week in metal. And the reason for that is Tesseract finally dropped their album last Friday. After waiting a long 5 years, we had every popular djent band drop an album at least this year or last year. And so with that, we always knew that Tesseract was going to drop something, but we didn't know when. And we waited anxiously, and here we are. It's finally here. War of Being is out, and I'm going to talk about it. If you've listened to the album, write down below, what did you think of the album? What would you rate it? And does it stack up to their discography that we all know and love? Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and let's jump into the review. So after waiting 5 years for this album release, there's definitely some expectations going into this album. If you're going to be holding us out for 5 years for new music, then well, I'm gonna assume that you've been working on something fresh, something new. And this all came into existence when they dropped their first single called War of Being, which is the title track and also the longest track on the album. And straight away, it is the most Tesseract song that Tesseract has ever put out. Now, let me explain myself. So it's very common for bands when they're starting a new album cycle to pick out certain tracks to, showcase the new album through single. And usually the first track they always go for is nothing new. It's not meant to be this fresh thing, something exciting. It's usually meant to, one, remind the current fans of how the band sounds in general. And it's also a great way to get new fans to sort of get a good understanding of what your band sounds like, especially, over the years. In this case, this is the 5th album they've put out within the past decade. And with the first single that came out, War of Being, it definitely showcased everything that we've grown to love about the band, from the first album, which was called One, all the way to Sonder, which came out back in 2017. So straight away with War of Being, I wasn't overtly impressed with the song, and I kind of knew that it was going to be that way going in because, again, it's the first single, and it's usually to get people back onto the band's side with how they sound and how they have been sounding for their entire discography. The writing was pretty Tesseract. It wasn't anything I would say new. Granted, the opening of the song did give me this hint of a fresher take on their music. However, it definitely did just go back into their usual stuff that we've heard before. However, the biggest part of the song, and I'll be honest, with most of the album, was Daniel Tompkins himself. During the years preceding Sonder, he definitely mentioned how he was a bit annoyed about his vocal performance on Sonder, and if he ever had the opportunity to redo Sonder, he would definitely do it because his voice sounds so much better now, and that is 100% showcased within War Being, the single, and the rest of the album. This is definitely the Daniel Tompkins show, but we will get into Daniel Tompkins a bit later. Next, we had the track The Grey, which had a very interesting rollout in the way that it was actually teased through a video game that Tesseract had made, which is like, what? Wait, musicians are doing other mediums of art? You have to at this point. It's social media, you gotta get the buzz going, and I think they did a really good job this time. So they put out this first-person kind of VR game using the Unreal 5 engine, which at the end, if you succeeded in beating the game, you got to hear The Grey, which was the next thing that came out. The Grey is definitely a different take from Tesseract, one that definitely brings me back to the album One, which is their heaviest album. The Grey is definitely one of their heavier tracks on the album. It also showcases how far Daniel Tompkins has come as a vocalist and that he's able to comfortably incorporate screams, growls, fry screams, and that is definitely shown in the track The Grey. Me personally, I thought the track didn't really add a whole lot to what I was getting. In fact, it felt, again, more like, here's a reminder that we can do heavier stuff as well as lighter stuff. And then finally, we got the track Legion, which for me personally was my favorite single that dropped for this album. It had this really cool music video that sort of reminded me, and I think they were intentionally going for the whole 2001 A Space Odyssey vibe, which they succeeded. It definitely gave me that vibe. You have Daniel Tompkins, just a camera on his face, and it's very like, we're looking at him going through all these experiences that are happening around him. So really cool. I really liked it. Again, hugely showcasing his voice. I thought the writing in it was really interesting, really cool. It was definitely a track that even after I listened to the entire album was one I did go back to quite often. But now we jump into the full album. Full album is dropped and I listened to it, and I'm going to say straight away, definitely listen to this album on Apple Music, on Spotify, Tidal, wherever you listen to it. Try and not judge it for the YouTube version, because I'll say it now, the YouTube one, it is compressed a little bit too much, and as a result there's a lot of elements that I missed out on when I first listened to the album via YouTube. I went back and listened to it on Apple Music. Oh my god, there was so much brought forward. The layering, the instrumentations were a lot better balanced, or had a better balance to them. So definitely, if you're gonna listen to this, do not listen to it on YouTube if you care at all. I mean, I care. It's one of my favorite djent bands. So when going through the album, I'm gonna be honest, I was a bit disappointed when I finished it the first time around, because overall it didn't feel like the band really aimed to do anything new here. There was definitely moments that new stuff was there, but overall the package that it was brought together felt like I've heard this before. I've heard this on One, I heard this on Altered State, I heard this on Polaris, and I heard this on Sonder. There wasn't anything hugely new coming through. Proceeding, I listened to it again. I really had to sort of, I guess, suspend my thoughts about it, and I did enjoy it a bit more on the second time listen. There's a lot more moments where I was like, wow, that's a cool effect. And of course, listening to it on Apple Music, there was a lot of things I was able to pick out more. And I guess this is as good a time as any to go and talk about the vocals, because as I said, this was the Daniel Tompkins show. Daniel Tompkins to me is one of my favorite vocalists in the djent scene and the progressive metal scene. He has consistently done such a good job at incorporating all these kind of classical vocal stylings while still keeping it very modern. And he's done this with his whole career, with all his side projects as well. And here is no different. In fact, here he goes even a bit further by adding, as I said, those screams, those growls, those more guttural effects. However, I did feel at times it felt a bit overindulgent. What I mean by that is that it constantly felt like there was this urge, or this urgency, to constantly show off every vocal styling that he had. And in some moments, I kind of just wish, like, hey, Daniel, calm down. Like, sustain the note a bit longer. Maybe we don't need to do the mordant over here on your vocal. You know, maybe we can just simplify the vocal lines a bit more than, you know, what you're doing right now. Moments like this were definitely few and far between. One of the moments was in Legion, especially when he kind of just broke away and kind of did a whole sort of, I guess, vocal solo, and then sort of reeling himself back in. Honestly, that's probably the only real criticism I had about the vocals, is just that I felt sometimes it was going a bit overboard with the verbose nature of his vocal stylings. The other thing is that the mix on this album, which is a big thing, is solid. I never doubted the mix was gonna be bad. Apple has just a way to create these amazing balanced mixes that are unique sounding, because honestly, I don't hear any other band sounding like Tesseract. In a world where everybody seems to wanting to be louder and more aggressive sounding, I like the fact that they do bring it back a little bit more and give a bit more of a dynamic range on the music, which will help them in the future because it makes it more future-proof. Granted, I did feel that some moments in this album were definitely more compressed than what I've heard before on their discography, but I'll let that slide because at the end of the day, I still think the mix was solid. Like for me, I've already chosen a couple of tracks off the album to use as PA testing songs. So overall, what do I think about this album? I think it's a good album. Do I think it's their best album? No. I think that title will forever be with Altered State, which is a shame because that was the one Daniel was not a part of. But honestly, with this album, if I was to put it in a slot, I would definitely have it above One and even slightly above Polaris. I definitely don't think it meets the criteria of Altered State. I think Altered State was just definitely a complete fluke, and I think it's just amazing the way it is overall. So Altered State is going to be Altered State. Funny enough, I thought Sonder overall as a package was better. I think they did a lot more creative things on that album than I heard here. Tracks like King, Luminary, Juno, Mirror Image just all felt like there was a lot more creative juices flowing and a lot more just interesting things happening. Again, what I'd say is I'd definitely put this album slotted between Polaris and Sonder. Maybe closer to a Sonder on like evenness, but that's my overall thought about it. And if I was to give it a rating out of 10, 7 out of 10 is probably the right thing I would give it. If you're a Tesseract fan, you're gonna listen to this album, you're gonna love it. I listened to it as a Tesseract fan myself and I pretty much love it. If you're a person who has never listened to Tesseract, I'd honestly recommend this album to you because it really just showcases the entire career of this band. It's an album that really just shows off all the things that make Tesseract so good. And if you weren't sure where to start with a band like this would be the perfect album. In a weird way, I kind of see this like that first paragraph in a Wikipedia article where it tells you everything about the band, but without going into the detail. So if you do like this album, you can kind of find the tracks that you really liked, and you'll probably find a song from the previous albums that really match that feel, that vibe. But anyway, this was my sort of quick-ish review about the new Tesseract album, War of Being. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about this album and where you'd rank it in the discography. But besides that, thank you for watching. Like this video and subscribe for more content such as this. And of course, stay hydrated, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.